Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. We are here at the Freeport High School cafeteria, and we have our full board in attendance this evening. Maura Pillsbury is attending remotely via Zoom. And we also want to welcome Angela Kinghorn, our newest member of the board from Pownell. So thank you, Angela. Welcome to the board. We'll have plenty to keep you busy. And do I have to make sure we can hear everybody? Do I have to do that, like, check to see if the remote person can hear and be heard? Right, so I think I did. I think we're going to do it this time, just to be sure. Okay, Jeremy Clough.
Present.
Candy DeSipkis. Lindsay Fertney.
Yes.
Jen Galetta.
Here.
Susanna Hancock.
Yes.
Angela Kinghorn.
Here.
Beth Munson.
Here.
Maura Pillsbury.
Yes.
Thank you. I am here. I just have to keep telling myself that I'm here. I'm here. Vali Steverlink.
Yes.
Maddie Vertenton.
Yes.
And Brady Grogan.
Here.
Great. Thank you. All right. So we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the December 9th, 2020 meeting, barring any errors or omissions. Susanna? Beth, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Oh, I have to do a roll call. Sorry. I got very first one. I messed it up. Okay. I forgot we have to do these. All right, we'll start again. Jeremy Clough.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Angela.
Yep.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
And Brady.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Adjustments to the agenda? No, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We just have one adjustment to the agenda. We are going to postpone the award for the outstanding contribution to the community service because the student was not able to be here tonight, so we will do that at a future date.
Okay, well, then hopefully Brady's ready to go because you're up next on the agenda.
So because of COVID numbers rising in Maine, all extracurriculars at the high school have been moved to online. I can't speak for everyone, but for basketball, we brought in multiple guest speakers from colleges around Maine, and they brought in players and they've talked to us. And you can tell that the coaches and trainers try to make the best of the situation we have. The high school has switched to online classes until next Tuesday, as a necessary precaution, they said. Our semester ends the end of next week, which means it's midterms next week, which everyone loves. And sophomores and juniors will take the PSATs January 26th to end off the month.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are to the first public comment period of the meeting. And to participate for public comment, I don't think we have anybody in person to speak, but if we had anyone on Zoom that was interested in speaking, you can use the raise hand function. And we can give you access to speak. Jen is checking the Zoom meeting to see if we have any interested parties. Not seeing any? Okay. Well, we do have another public comment at the end of the agenda, so if you missed this one and had something to say, we have another opportunity later on, but we will move on to the Superintendents Report.
Okay, thank you. Happy New Year. December was not too kind to us with COVID cases, nor the beginning of January. We are now at 15 confirmed and 3 probable for a total of 18 of our students having COVID since the return to school in September. With the majority of the students at the high school, as Brady said, we have moved to remote learning there. I continue to encourage our families to try to have them help us restrict the socializing of our students outside of school, and when they are socializing, we really would love for them to have their mask on and to do the physical distancing so that we can have our kids return to in-person learning next week and keep it that way. As you know, the data in the state is also trending upwards. I was kind of surprised as I was preparing my report to see that in December when I was speaking to you, Freeport had 53 cases and now they're at 130. And so I think you can see how quickly we're trending upwards. Durham has moved from 24 to 45, and Pownell has remained between 6 and 19, and South Freeport has also remained between 1 and 5. So we just need to work together to try to get this COVID under control. The budget process continues, and I'm looking forward to presenting the FY22 budget at our next board meeting. And so we're busy preparing for that. With the recent tragic events at the Capitol, I just want to say that I really feel thankful to be working in a community and state that respects and appreciates differing viewpoints and is very committed to creating safe and inclusive spaces for our students and staff to learn and work. And I just want to reiterate that we in RSU 5 have absolutely zero tolerance for racism, violence, bullying, and disrespect. I truly appreciate working with the board and an administrative team, many of who are here tonight, that do not always agree, but can listen to differing viewpoints and then accept the decisions of the majority. I do want to conclude my report tonight reporting that we have 4 retirements for the end of the year. Nancy Drolet, phys ed and health teacher, completing her 21st year in the district. Rose Panette, Durham Community School office secretary, with this year completing her 35th year in the district. Linda Pritchard, Freeport Middle School special ed teacher, with this year completing her 25th year. And then lastly, Peter Walensky, school psychologist. He will complete his 11th year in the district. That's a lot of years of service from just 4 individuals, and we truly appreciate everything that they have given to the RSU 5 and to our students. And that completes my report for tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to 9 administrative reports, and we will start with the district scorecard. Cynthia Alexander.
Good evening. Welcome, Angela. And I hate to do this to you, but my presentation is going to be behind you. So if you're comfortable, you can turn, or I think there's an extra seat where Mara is sitting. I don't know which makes more sense. Thank you. It's warming up, so you'll start seeing it coming soon. Don't know if we need the lights a little bit dimmer.
I think you all also have the PowerPoint in your board packet.
You're stealing my
If
my
you want to
narrative.
take some notes on it or questions.
So good evening, and in your purple folders, you will find a copy of tonight's presentation. Jenny had added those in for you, so you would have that as well as the district scorecard that you already had received. I did send Mara the presentation, so she is able to look at that as well. So those two documents will be helpful for you to follow along. And as you may remember, a little over a year ago, we had developed a protocol for reviewing student data, which culminates in January at this presentation each year. And as a review, as students are assessed during the year, there's several different assessments at different levels throughout the year. Part of the protocol is that as those results come in within a month, we've established these timelines for our data specialists to input that data set into our student information system, which is PowerSchool. And then we also concurrently at the same time, the information is entered into these individual scorecards that every principal receives for their buildings. Special ed receives one, I get one for Gate, and then they feed right into this district scorecard. So that's how all this information gets gathered, disseminated, and we picked January because it felt like the perfect spot to do the presentation for several reasons. So I've got to navigate this and this. Okay. So the purpose is for us to be looking at our celebrations and noticings from this snapshot. So last year, for those of you who were here on the board, we had chunked the information into 3 different segments. We looked at MEA data, we looked at MAP assessment data, which you know is NWEA, that's the vendor that has the MAP assessment, and then we looked at the high school and beyond information and the celebrations and noticings. So as you know, last March, mid-March, we were pushed into remote learning due to COVID, and we were unable to assess students in the spring other than for the advanced placement classes. And so therefore the data I will focus on tonight will not come from the MEAs or the SATs or the growth measures from the MAP assessments or the FONS and Pinnell. I will instead focus on the MAP assessment achievement data that students took this fall and the high school and beyond data that is available. All of the principals and the Director of Instructional Support are here this evening, and if you have any specific building level or special education questions after the presentation, they're here to answer those if need be. So as you know, I think in 2018, we began to assess the MAP assessment. We began to use that in the spring and measure growth from spring to spring for all students in grades 2 through 10 in reading and math. And as I just mentioned, we were not able to be in person last spring. We assessed our students this past fall, and we won't be looking at that growth measure this year, but we will be assessing again in the spring, and we will be able to have growth from the fall to the spring this year. And then the only other thing on this slide that I'd like to point out is those few notes on the bottom. When we're looking at the data that's coming up in the next couple of slides, the high school students in grades 9 and 10, I think if you remember a few years ago it was really spotty, then we got everybody really on board to take the assessments. The students, because the students are in hybrid this year, they're here half of the time, and there was so much going on to onboard with the synchronous learning and all of that. We did have a few students that we were not able to get finished assessing for this data piece. They were assessed, but we had a deadline of November 13th so that Paula could get this stuff in. And then the remote students that were in grades 3 through 5 were not assessed on the MAP assessment, and then the remote students in grade 6 were not assessed in ELA. We were able to do it through all the 7th through 10th graders in remote. It was a little easier, and I can explain why later if you have questions about that. It was just a little more challenging for the teachers at the lower level, and Mrs. Demick had tried to do that, but there was some complications around that. So we opted not to. The number of students, I believe, were like 7, and I have it on a later slide, so you'll see how many didn't take it. Okay, so what you're looking at here on this slide is reflective of the academic achievement data that we were able to gather this fall in reading on the MAP assessment. So if you would look at your scorecards, you can go to page 8 on your scorecard, because that's where the data set comes from. And I'll wait till you get there. And as you look at this sheet, I'll take you where to look at in a minute on the scorecard, but if you go back to this slide or your presentation sheets that you have, those cranberry bars in the graph illustrate how students did in comparison to it's the average or above average, how they did, if they were average or above average on taking this test. And so let's take a look at those first 2 bars that are labeled. If you look up here or on your sheet, it says grade 5. In the cranberry, that's our current grade 5 this fall, class of 28. So what you're seeing is a 78.5% scored in the average or above average range on this reading assessment. The pink one to the left is that same group of students, same cohort of students. That was their spring 2019 test. So 74.4% of that same cohort of students, that's what they were at the average or above average score for that. So if you're looking at your scorecard, if you look at the bottom right on that page 8, you see that fall 2020, and you see that 78.5% on the reading. Is there anybody that doesn't? Okay. And then if you go up to the 3rd grade, way at the top, the column that is headed spring 2019 percentage, you'll see that 74.4. So that's the pattern. So if you go to the next column, grade 6, class of 27, you would just go to the top of the next page, page 9, and you see that 79.5%. And then you go back, you're not going back 2 grades, but it's that full year plus this to the spring, so you get 75.2. So when looking at this graph, let's see, I went off my script here. A couple of noticings. What I wanted to tell you was the students in remote learning at grades 5 and 6 did not participate in this assessment. There were 7 in grade 5 and then 12 in grade 6 at the time of the testing. I told you I would give you those numbers. But if you look at this graph, you can see that they were at a little bit of a higher level. So it's not really necessarily growth data, but in some ways it is. So that was the best that I could pull out of the data to show you how we were doing without looking at a specific growth assessment that they use. So that's what reading looks like. I also wanted to point out that we're also working under another set of a different set of norms. So the norms that you see for the norms that were used this year with the cranberry were 2020 norms, and those norms were developed in the year for over a 3-year period of time from 2015 through 2018, and they use fall, winter, and spring data to do that. The prior norms that were the pink norms were 2015 norms. They re-norm this nationally about every 5 years.
And what does it mean, norm?
So if you take all of the students across the United States and they are all taking the test, there's a mean, and they're looking at comparing that to the mean. So what are you expecting how are you expecting the students to perform on this math assessment in grade 5? So it's really a comparison. That's one thing that's really nice about this assessment. So this next slide is the math slide. And as you can see from this graph, this works in the very same way. So you can go to the same sections, just look at the second part of it, and you'll get the math data. There was improvement at all grade levels except that grade 5 cohort. The math was quite a bit higher in the when they were third graders. And then the students in remote learning in grades 5 did not participate in this assessment, but the 6th grade did. Okay.
Jeremy?
I might be missing something large in there, but should that say fall 2020 on the
Yes,
the legend?
thank
Okay.
you.
I was like,
did I do that on the other one too?
I think so. Just want to make
Yeah.
sure it wasn't predictive somehow in that. So okay, thank you.
So sorry. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's not predictive. We hope it's higher.
We are all so over 2020, we won't even type it anymore.
Yes. I had a license plate and I changed it out. It has a 2020. I changed it out too. It's like done. Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Okay, so the celebrations and noticings, the cohorts are at all grade levels in reading and math, with the exception of that grade 5 math we just saw. We're improving. And then when comparing cohort data for students with identified disabilities, you can see in the actual scorecard, there's also a line for identified disabilities. So we looked at those as well. Bonnie and I looked at those, and they also had improvements noted in reading and math in all classes except a slight decrease in reading in the class of 24 and a slight decrease in math of, or not a slight decrease, but a decrease in math for the class of 27. So, so there were just the 2 grade levels, so we are also seeing growth there. Okay. So this is the part where I say, any questions for, you know how I chunked it last time? There's not a lot to, other than what I explained, but if you have any questions for me or for anybody.
Lindsay?
Thanks. I would just ask, what do you, who are used to looking at this data,
Yes.
what does that grade 5 tell you, that little slump?
So what we'd have to do is dig a little deeper into it. So there could be there's a lot of variables that could be, right? We never just make that assumption. So it could be students moving in and out. It could be, I don't know. It could be a variety of things. So the best way to look at it is go into the individual data, which we can do, and really take a look at the why. And that's what we do with the individual scorecards, and we look for patterns and trends and see, what supports are those students giving. There's lots of things we can do to help support students. But as to why it dropped, I can't tell you right in this moment, or even why I want to hazard the guess there. But it's absolutely something we'll look at for sure when we notice things like that.
The other thing I would say is just, that would be something that would do with our math specialist too.
Yes.
Because this was given at the end of 3rd grade and then at the beginning of 5th. So that will be something where we'll say what happened in 4th grade, like across the district, and we might look at various schools. But overall, considering what we've just kind of lived through and everything, I was delighted to see us going up in almost all of our grades. So I do think that it's
Celebration.
a big celebration to what our teachers were even able to do, in spite of COVID and going to remote learning.
Okay, then, I'm sorry, Maddie.
Maddie?
Thank you for the second celebration and asking Bonnie to identify the students with identified disabilities, and that's all a good news story except in a couple cases.
Yes.
I feel like I ask a version of this every year, either with regard to that group or the economically disadvantaged. Did you take a look at that as well?
No, we haven't delved into that yet, but we will. We absolutely do that at the building levels and, try to figure out, why is that and what we need to do more in our instruction. Yep.
Brady?
You said that the kids in remote didn't get to take the test in the fall. How many kids was that?
So it was just in the 3rd through 5th grade, And let's ask Lisa. I think I said it was 7 and I said it in one of my slides. Yeah, 7 and 12. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to move on to section 2, which is the high school and beyond section. And we're going to look at advanced coursework. So this is the advanced placement testing. This slide shows the 6 years of data at the high school regarding the advanced placement testing. And this, if you look at the top right of the slide, you'll see that 130 students in the district, the total number of students enrolled in advanced placement were 130. And that's a nice celebration too, because last year we had gone up to 133. So that's really nice to see that. And we in our district allow any students to take it. We don't say you have to qualify in any certain way. That's just a reminder. We encourage all students to try any of the AP classes that they wish to take. So then the total number of students scoring 3 or higher, which is considered passing, on at least one exam is 103. The total number of students who took the exam was 130. So that's where you get that number in that second row, the percent of students scoring 3 or higher on at least one exam. So 79.2% of our students, of those 103, were got a score of 3 or higher. So they might have taken more than one exam, but at least one exam, they got a 3 or higher. That's pretty big during COVID times. The total number of AP exams that earned a score of 3 or higher is 165. And the number of AP exams taken, the total number taken, was 236. So that gives you that last calculation on the bottom row. The percent of AP exam that results in a score of 3 or higher is 69.9%.
Can you tell me again, what's the difference between the number under the 130? So the percent of students scoring 3 or higher on at least one AP exam, and the percent of US AP students scoring 3 or higher on at least one exam. How are those different?
Yeah, we can no longer get that data. That was the US, it's across the country.
That's not just us. That's
no, sorry,
okay.
It's not us, it means United States.
Okay, so that's just sort of a comparison. How are we doing against the average? Okay, thank you.
And we tried to get that data, and Jen Gulker and I talked about, tried to figure out how to get that. She actually reached out to her colleagues. Paula had looked at all of the documents, and we just were not able to get that data this year.
So last year,
Yes.
in the chaos of the spring of 2020,
Yes.
we had our highest percent of students getting at least a 3 on at least one exam, and the highest percentage overall of all of our tests getting a 3.
Yes. So I have a caveat to that. The little caveat is they shortened the test. So, well, I still think it's a celebration, but they did shorten the test. They shortened the actual test and shortened the time. So quite a bit. Quite a bit. It was, I don't know, maybe less than a half of what they usually do. Did Brady? He's nodding his head. Did you take an AP test last spring? Yeah, you heard that. Okay. Okay.
And I'll put out the theory, I think we got better at our teaching.
I'm going with that too.
Just because it's shorter doesn't mean it was easier, right?
That's correct. That is correct. So, okay, and then the next slide is.
Oh, we got a question.
Oh,
Can we
I'm
ask
so
a question
sorry.
now? Jen?
Just looking at how much the numbers have increased from 2014 to 2019 in terms of students taking AP classes. Have our classes increased at that same level, or is it just more kids in a class, or do we have more offerings?
I'm not, I know we have a lot of offerings. Let me just defer to Jen about the number of increased offerings from a couple of years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago.
Hi, everyone. So we have increased the number of classes that are available. One example would be U.S. history. We didn't offer U.S. history in the past. Also, students can take more classes online for AP offerings. And then we also have significantly increased the number of students who are taking AP language, the English course. So we've gone from one small section to now we have three full sections of that class. So high 60s, the number of students who are taking that. And keeping in mind our population has increased significantly. It's increased by 100 students since I've been here in 6 years. So, and I will put in a plug for the shorter, still difficult test. They covered the material from September to March, and then they stopped in March with new material. And according to if you look on the College Board's AP site, they say that they feel like the content was comparable, but it was shorter, and some students can demonstrate their skills without that long stamina of a three-ish hour test. So, but according to the College Board, they say that the test was short and hard.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Oh, I think Jen has
Eddie.
one. I don't know if
Just while you're up there, can you speak to the testing for this year? Is it going to be more comparable to before last year, or more like what last year looked like?
So they right now are saying that it is going to be similar to a typical year, which I think has raised some concerns. I don't know if they will change that, but that is the statement that they have made right now, that they are continuing with the year-long plans. They've made some adjustments, but not like last year. I don't know if they'll come out with some sort of statement as they see how the year progresses. I would imagine that they would have to adjust.
And I'd also like to give kudos to Jen, because I know that in the past 4 years or so, you've really taken the data seriously and met with your departments around that, the teachers that are teaching those classes. And I think that makes an impact.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we've tried to, it can be isolating to be an AP teacher. Often you are a singleton teacher, and so you have to seek a network outside of our school. And our teachers have done an outstanding job. They're part of Facebook groups. They've found all sorts of ways to connect. But then we, in the last 4 years, have been meeting as a cohort of our AP teachers more often so that they can share resources and things like that. But our AP teachers have just done a wonderful job, and they work very hard to keep up with what the College Board's doing.
I think it'll be interesting to see if they go back to the 3-hour test. If they can, with a straight face say, we were able to assess the same amount of content, why make them go through grueling 3-hour tests if you can get the same information in an hour and a half or 2 hours? I know they do.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. This next slide is showing the graduation cohort. This is not a certified percentage yet, but I guarantee that this is going to be will be the certified one. I think we're certifying it this week. So it's 96.2% graduation this year, up from 93.2. As a reminder, we changed our graduation credit requirement last year. I think that helped that situation quite a bit from that 24 to 18. And then, as you also remember, later on, in the summer, we moved our credits to 20 permanently from this year going forward. So, but it is a nice celebration to see that we had that many students graduating. The next two slides that you see, the first one is a post-secondary readiness and success. So that's that first year enrollment and persistence. So we don't have class of 2020 data yet, but we have the class of 2019. And out of the 139 students you'll see that graduated that year, 96 went on to college, either a 2-year or 4-year, and could be private or public schooling. And it might be in or out of state, and that's 69.1% of our graduates. And then the following slide, let me go back to that other slide first, I'm sorry. Let's see. I would just want to call your attention to 2017, the class of 2017 that had 114 students that graduated that year, and 80 of those students, or 70.2% of those students, went on to college. So then when you go to the next slide and you look at 2017, we have 72 instead of the 80 there, of 100 out of the 114, so it's 63.2% are still in college at that point at the end of the second year. And I know last year I was asked, do we collect data on, those are going to the military and all that? We don't have a good way, although I did check in with Jen and she said every year for the last 3 years there's been from 1 to about 3 students who've gone on into the military. There's just not a way to gather that data that we know of at this point.
Maddie?
Yeah, I think I asked not necessarily about the military, but meaningful work.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if Region 10 tracks some of their graduates. I think we really should be celebrating all avenues that are post-high school and not just collegiate avenues. We should include that in this, and that should be part of our culture.
Thank you.
I agree. I think the trade schools and the certificate programs for, trades, and I think all those are just as beneficial for kids coming out of high school and preparing for their careers, whatever their careers may be. So I don't know how you do it, but
right. If I may, can I defer to ask Jen a question?
Sure.
Do you know, Jen, if they track that?
So one of the things that we do is we ask students, and it's always shared at graduation, what's their anticipated plan. What's difficult is that this data comes from the National Clearinghouse, so we are not in charge of tracking this data because it's incredibly hard to track our alumni. I do think that we could anecdotally share out at the end of the year what our students' plans were, but in terms of the scorecard, particularly their second year, that is something that would be very difficult for us to track, because the National Clearinghouse tracks that as an indicator of were students feeling prepared to continue on with college for that second year, whereas some of the trade school programs are only 1 year, or they're only 6 months or 10 months or something like that. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't even be a valid data point for them. But I do think that we could probably at the last board meeting, we could share what students' anticipated plans are. I just don't know if it would be part of the scorecard.
Yeah, no, I think, the second year persistence piece probably doesn't fit because they're just different types of programs. But, just sort of an overall number of the percentage of our kids that have plans after high school, like they're moving on to the military, to trade school, to college, to, some sort of post-secondary, education, whatever that looks like for them. I think that's a helpful number for us to know the percentage. Maddie?
Yeah, and I think even if it's anecdotal and we take that information that we have from graduation and we include it in this presentation in January, it just keeps us all mindful of how valid all these different things are. And, who knows what the world's going to look like next year? I mean, if you believe the national reporting, there may be a lot fewer kids who are college bound right away. And I think it's helpful to our community and our students to hear us talk about these alternatives as really valid options that we respect.
And I can absolutely share that information from the class of 2020 at the next board meeting. I also think that the board should be aware that this data will be significantly impacted next year, because we're seeing kids not going back to school this year for their second year because of the cost of online school, and they've made the decision to either take a gap year or transfer to another school. So there will definitely be an impact to that post-secondary persistence data.
So I agree with Jen, we don't need to put it in this scorecard, but I think absolutely we can put it in a slide for the presentation, so I like that idea. There's also a couple in, Jen made a reference to the National Clearinghouse. It's a very long, I don't know, 70-page document. They also show, I mean, it's not current if you're going back 3 or 4 or 5 years, but they have these nice graphs that say who went back to school even later. You know, and they have nice graphs to show you. So I might, for that year, have to pull something like that out to show you, because I think it's also good data as well. It's not as concrete with numbers like this, but okay. So this little graphic I had introduced to you last year, because we found this in an article, and so then created it with these little figurines. So this takes that class of 2017 that I had pointed out to you in the last 2 slides. So they were entering the freshman year, grade 9, the fall of 2013. So that represents 100% of those students. That's 90.3. And the next one down is the percent, the next one down is actually graduation rate. It was 90.3. And then the third one down is those entering college at 70.2%. And then those now returning to college, or who returned to college for that second year, which was a while back, is 63.2. So the celebrations and noticings. And I already had mentioned this, that the AP, well, let's go back to the top. Post-secondary classes of 2017 through 2019, if you look at the percentages that have gone to college, it's within 2%. It ranged from 68.2 to 70.2 for the last 3 years, so that's pretty stable. The AP classes, we have the highest percent of individual students scoring a 3 or higher on an AP exam at 79.2%. And I also mentioned, I already kind of mentioned this about the credit changes that we had, and the 1 to 3 going into the military. And that concludes tonight's presentation.
Any more questions for Cynthia?
Okay.
Okay. We'll wait for Valerie to get back to her mic.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a great presentation, and I really appreciate the fact that you showed the slides with the cohorts. Because
Yes.
I was going to ask you, where is that great slide where we see the bands of color so we can follow the same cohort? So thank you.
Yeah.
Super useful.
Yes.
The one thing that I wish we could show somehow, and I'm not sure if this year is even available, but I always like to know how our gains compare to the other cohort schools and geographically close to us. So if that's something that you can continue to provide, that would be super helpful.
So that, I think that will be, that's not available this year?
Right.
I mean, I guess we could do it for, would you want to see it for graduation rates and things like that too?
If it's available, yeah, that would be helpful.
We could do it for some data points, but
right.
the NWEA, it wouldn't be possible to do. We're not sure if all of the districts are using the NWEA yet. They will be, most likely, because that most likely will be our state assessment. I think it's fair to put that out there. And so at that point, going forward, we might be able to do some of that. But we could get, like, graduation. I could look through and see if there's anything in here that we could do comparisons for.
And I also just wanted to say I was super impressed that we didn't see this slide that I was expecting to see, so I had to double check each number to make sure, wow, they actually did better despite everything. So great job, everyone.
I will say that I think Maddie, so we haven't had this data that long either, so we'll definitely be delving into it. But just from Maddie's comment, the trend at the elementary level is a little bit troubling for our economically disadvantaged this year. They dropped a lot. It's funny, when you start looking around 8th grade, they seem to be fine, but something's going on, and it could be very related to the COVID and things that happen. But there's some significant drops, and we'll have to kind of dig into that data and see who the individual kids are that dropped. And again, I think that's just one example of why it's important to get kids like that back 5 days a week, because you can see that it's really impacting their learning for some kids.
Okay, thank you. So next, under administrator reports, are update on the 2020-2021 district goals. Becky.
Okay, in your board packet, you have the green sheet. And we have our administrators here tonight because there's a wide variety of things we'll be talking about, and they're here to answer any specific questions that you might have around the district goals. And I'm not going to, in honor of Valley's request not to read to you, I'm making the assumption that you've kind of looked over this, so I'm just going to highlight certain areas. The first board goal was around strengthening and aligning all social emotional development systems, and even though we've paused some of this work, we've had a lot of comments from parents and other people about are you looking at the social emotional well-being of our students? And I do want you to know that even though we've paused a lot of our work, we do now have a screener for social emotional well-being that's being implemented at some level in all of our schools pre-K to 8. The second goal that you see there was around our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and I'm going to skip that one because we have a whole presentation on that, so I'll just keep you waiting on that one. The next goal on the second page about providing strong support for professional practices where we're ensuring that we're hearing teacher voice. Cynthia and I continue to meet with the association president once a month to check in with her to give her updates about what we're doing around professional development and to hear what she's hearing so that we're getting more student voice, staff voice as we're planning these days. In addition to that, all of our principals check in with their leadership team, and they work with the literacy and math coaches around providing professional development so that we're trying to provide development in areas that are meaningful to them. So for one example, I know that Jen at the high school did something with synchronous learning that was open, that was it was staff choice, but it was needed this fall as we move to more synchronous learning. The next goal is around, formalizing when we look at data, and Cynthia just reviewed that with you, so unless there are further questions, I'm not going to spend any more time on that one. Expanding the avenues to proactively distribute information about RSU 5 schools. We did do the staff survey in the fall to gather feedback, and as you know, we've done another survey with the staff about stress, and then our plan is to do yet another one at the end of January. The Strategic Communications Committee reviewed the communication list on October the 16th, so we do that at least yearly to reflect on, do we want to communicate in a different way? They're in the process of coding the student exit survey, and we have a meeting scheduled in just a couple of weeks. We also have, Cynthia and I have another Q&A planned for the end of the month for both staff and then a separate one for community. We did that in the fall via Zoom and got the best participation that we've ever had. So we're planning on continuing those. The next one that was around really delving into our school parent community partnerships. We put that on pause because of our year of COVID. The next one is talking about ensuring that staff and students have quality facilities. Dennis updated you in the fall on the capital improvement plan. And then one of the areas that we really need to work on is the enrollment study. We still have not decided on what company will do that work. The next one is around attracting and retaining highly effective staff, and the Finance Committee has heard from Rick, about the Director of Finance, about us moving to a new platform July 1st called Infinite Visions, and we're looking forward to getting rid of our dinosaur called Encode. So on the next goal, improving and ensuring student access to the highest quality school nutrition program. I think one of the biggest, I just have to give a real shout out to Erin Dow, that she and her team have done just a fabulous job. Just recently, area superintendents were asking how much money are you losing in your nutrition program, and so there's been a Excel spreadsheet that has been created, and of the area schools around us, I don't think anyone's doing as well as we are, but that's because they don't have an Erin Dow in her team. Because they moved quickly to make sure that they were providing meals to our families during the pandemic. Then they moved quickly to keep serving meals to our family throughout the summer. Her staff were working at a time that, many others were not. And then even when they returned to school, and with all the COVID protocols, they have really worked to increase participation with breakfast at several of our schools, and we're just seeing percentages that are kind of astronomical with increasing participation in that. So I really credit her and her team for the success of that program. Then on the next one, strengthen community engagement and support in short and long-term financial planning. As you know, that Rick only came on, I think it was in August. And so we're currently looking at the documents that we're providing to the community and discussing whether we can make those more user-friendly. So you'll probably be hearing more about that as we unfold the budget. The next one is around ensuring that all of our facilities are operating efficiently. As you know, we're in the midst of an audit, and our first priority, because of COVID, was around ventilation. We're kind of finishing that up, and we'll be moving on to lighting next. Then, in addition to those things, we just have a few other minor little things going on this year. Teacher negotiations, we're waiting to get our third member since Dwight left the board. So after tonight, we'll be able to set up times to begin teacher negotiation. As you know, the reopening plan has just taken a tremendous amount of energy, creativity, flexibility, being adaptable, and I think that our team has done, we're far from perfect, but I think we've done a really good job. We now have 2 portables on site that aren't put together, but we're making progress. Uh, we have one at Durham. We have one at Morris Street. We have been meeting recently with Emily and Julie and Will to figure out what is the next phase. I mean, part of the problem with doing a good job, people want you to just keep doing a better job. And so we pulled off the Wolf Neck with a lot of work in the fall. And now parents are really missing, having their kids not in something on those days. So we've been brainstorming, and we feel like we will have something that will be rolling out to our families. I think we're starting to question them this week, and then we're hoping that the portables are assembled and ready to roll by the time the kids come back from February vacation, and we'll be able to provide some additional learning, I think, for all of our, we're hoping, this is aspirational. Yeah, I don't know. I may be able to think of a few more. Pre-K through 5, we're hoping to have all of the kids who are wanting to come back 5 days a week. We're hoping to have them back at least 4 days a week, which was like what we were doing with Wolf Neck. And so when I was reflecting on the goals and where we are, and it's always good to do these because you're so busy in the moment, sometimes you don't take the time to say, where are we? So that provides that opportunity. But to me, the next three, the three most pressing issues for us right now is for us to figure out who's doing the enrollment study, to get the portables in place, up and running so we can put students in them, and the teacher negotiations. And then we have a fabulous team here tonight, so just give them your best questions. Thank you.
Maddie.
I don't know that this qualifies as a best question. It's more of just a hope or a seed. I don't know that I necessarily need a response, but although this wasn't one of the recommendations from the audit, which we haven't gotten to yet, I did notice a lot of comments, maybe not a lot of comments, but a couple of comments that I flagged around hiring. And so I'm just hoping that in that goal 4.2 and moving to that new Infinite Visions platform, I'm hoping that we have an eye on what equitable best hiring practices are and ensuring that we're exceeding those objectives. I don't know what the state is doing to look at those, but I just want to make sure that we are at the forefront of that.
I don't think Infinite Visions is going to help us with that, but I think that there are ways to examine those practices, and I think when we get to that, I think MAC, I think that's how she pronounced it, MAEC, talked about that they could offer some support with that.
Valley?
Yeah, just on that same goal, the Infinite Visions platform, is that just for hiring? Or what does the platform do?
Oh, okay, Rick, can you? Yeah, that'd be great, at the mic, otherwise they can't hear you.
Not at home,
No,
they can't.
Not at home, they can't. Thank you. So just talk about all the different things that platform can help us do.
Maybe not all the things.
Okay, but like an overview.
I'm at the podium now. Infinite Visions is a comprehensive employee and financial software system that has a multitude of different modules in it that can be used to track employee issues through HR with regard to certifications, endorsements, those types of things. It also allows us to purchase items, issue purchase orders, track finances, all of those things. But it's like any other tool in that we can have the tool and it can have multitudes of functionality, but we have to be aggressive enough to utilize it in the fullest extent possible. Some of the things that you asked about, Maddie, those are processes that are actually outside of, you know, the tool itself. I mean, I certainly would be possible to use the tool to enhance those types of issues, but it wouldn't be the sole thing, you know, sole, you know, function of the platform itself. No, I think it's best to understand Infinite Visions in the sense that, you know, we use a hodgepodge of third-party programs to sort of manage the same things where, and as we have turnover with personnel, those kind of things, and trying to train people and reduce the amount of time that it takes to do the same things, we think we can certainly improve efficiency and communications through with the building administrators, with directors, and give them access to data that would take, otherwise might take a long time or be very labor intensive to be able to provide for. So, you know, I think it's reasonable to say that, you know, my predecessors and the people that currently work with this platform are looking forward to a change. It is extremely difficult to use, and as the Finance Committee was briefed tonight, even the auditors are suggesting that this is a very good move, that what we're working with right now is not really designed for K-12 public school systems, and we think it'll be a light years improvement in those types of issues.
Don't run away yet. Vali?
Thank you. So that sounds like it's a really good tool and it can improve efficiencies, but it depends on us, on how we use the tool, whether we are successful in attracting and retaining staff. So in addition to streamlining processes through that new tool, what are you guys thinking in terms of actual concrete steps that we can take to identify how to hire high qualified individuals, which we already do, but how to continue to improve to do that, and also how to continue to improve with our retention of staff?
Well, you know, certainly the hiring, the bringing on of personnel is only one of the steps in keeping, you know, once we get them in the door, it's certainly our desire as we invest a great deal amount of money in sort of making them RSU 5 folks and understanding our processes and how we think about things and how, you know, our student-centered sort of thought. We don't want to lose them to someone else. And, you know, that's a process that I think every business, every organization goes through, is continually reflecting on not only the compensation, which is certainly a part of retention, you know, and hiring, but also developing a culture where people feel like they're valued and that they can make a difference with regard to how the entire organization. I think in the very short time that I have been here, and I have been here only a really short time, you know, I have found this organization to be, you know, extremely open with regard to input from not only the directors and building administrators, but all the way down to our frontline folks, the bus drivers, the people that actually interface with children and parents on a daily basis. And that is part of that, you know, making sure that we're doing it right and keeping people, because, you know, as you might know, people will work for less money and less compensation if they really like where they're at. And I think I can really say without hesitation that people like working here. And that's a function of Becky and how her approach is to people. And you know, whenever I'm asked that question, that's the answer they get.
Maddie?
I can really geek out about this stuff, and maybe you and I should talk offline, because I come from an HR background. But one thing that I'd love to be able to maybe utilize this tool for, if this works, would be to identify the cultural competencies that are a fit with the district. I mean, we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time on outlining our new strategic vision and our mission, and every time that I've participated in a group that's doing any kind of hiring, we spend a lot of time in that first meeting sort of saying, what does everybody think we should be looking for? And while we might want to do that tailored to some individual roles, there are certainly some competencies that should be in every part of every interview. And so I think that's one, for me, fun way that we could beef up our and make our hiring process more efficient.
One of the things that I'm hoping this new software does, we've had a lot of complaints, even most recently with subs, saying that our current process is very cumbersome for them. And Peggy Brown does a great job of helping them through it, but I think with the new program that'll be much more streamlined, because if people go to apply for a job and they get frustrated and give up, we don't even have the opportunity to hire them. So I'm hoping that'll help too.
And this system will go from recruiting all the way through onboarding to an employee, right? Much more efficiently?
Yes, that is correct.
Valley?
I'm about to change to another goal, so if anyone has anything else. Rick, are you going to respond or add anything? Okay.
I think you're off the hook, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the other objective 1.1 for the first goal on the first page, the screener sounds like a great tool also, but again, it's a tool. What do we do with the kids that we identify, and are we seeing an increase in the number of students identified given COVID, and do we have the resources to address their needs, especially this year?
So I'm going to, I think, call up Principal Nickerson. I'm thinking, I may be wrong, has anybody used a screener longer than she has?
I don't think so. I think Nobody's going to say that now. No, I think we started and then everyone else has rolled on after. So Valley, can you repeat all your questions? I caught the first two.
As a tool that supposedly is very effective in identifying the students, that's a great first step. But what happens after? The second step is quantifying the need and then addressing the need. And do we have the resources to address all the need that we have right now? And are we seeing an increase in that need?
So the screener has allowed us, so prior to using a screener, often our groups that our guidance counselor and social worker would take were based on kind of anecdotal, it feels like this child needs a little more help. So the screener has allowed us to really hone in on specifics and be more objective in our kind of data collection around social emotional need. And, you know, I think our school counselors and social work have increasingly kind of taken on more and more responsibility. And so this allowed them to kind of tease out, okay, I'll address this in classroom guidance because it seems to be a need for everybody, or these are the children who are now surfacing with greater needs, so we'll target them for our groups. So it's really allowed kind of for that decision making to become a little clearer. In the same way we make those decisions for academics, it's always based in data and what's that showing us, and how do we address those needs. So like it's really allowed clarity around that, and allowed us to become more objective and see change over time. And my team just did theirs today for mid-year, and I was just looking at, you know, are there children now cropping up that we weren't noticing at the beginning of the year, and vice versa, have we seen growth in some? And so I don't see an increase based on this year. What I am hearing though is families are seeing a difference at home. So at school, you know, we're not necessarily seeing an increase in need, but there's kind of other factors kind of playing in. And there's definitely been growth. And I think for K2, pre-K2, we do see a lot of the social emotional growth based on the, a lot of the work that happens in terms of the foundational work, particularly in pre-K. If you look at their beginning one, most of it is red. And by mid-year and then end, it kind of all goes green. Green meaning there's no need and everything is looking good. Have I answered all your questions, or refocus me if...
Yeah, no, it sounds like there isn't a much greater need that has been identified, so I assume that means that you have the adequate resources to attend to emotional issues that may arise?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it for now. We have, Kelly Herzog is my school counselor, and she is working very hard. She's putting a lot of her energy into classroom work, knowing that we have smaller groups in our classrooms. So she's doing a lot of front loading of proactive work that everybody's getting this year, just because of the kind of complexities around where can we meet, and we can't even take our masks off, and those kinds of things. So she's doing a lot of pushing more so in the classrooms than small groups right now, because the need isn't showing for small groups. But which one came first, right? Like, because we knew we would want to just support children in ways we wouldn't necessarily need to all the time.
Maura, I think Maura has a question.
Hi, everyone. I don't have a question. I actually just wanted to express my gratitude for all of our administrators and our staff. I know you're working incredibly hard right now, and I just, looking at these things at the district scorecard and the goals that you're still working on, it's incredibly impressive, and it makes me really proud. So thank you so much. I know it's not easy. I know you're working so hard, so I'm very grateful.
Thanks. Susanna.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll echo Maura's thoughts, but I wanted to follow up as well with on the screener for the pre-K through 8. Can you just remind me how that screener works? Is that something that the entire class is done for the entire class? Okay.
Yeah, so any screener we do is done for everybody, always, no matter what. So, so that we can get across, slice of everybody. And yeah, so a classroom teacher has the categories that so one section is about externalizing behaviors and the other is internalizing. So identifying risk in both categories, and there's certain questions, and then they have to rate it how often they might see certain behaviors.
Okay, so every student is attended with that survey. Thank you.
Valerie.
So this screener is used until 8th grade, and what are we doing at the high school to improve services for students who have emotional and social needs there?
So I'll have Principal Golko come up.
So at the high school, part of my budget process last year was adding half of a social worker, which has been a huge advantage. So we now have 1.5 social workers, which has increased the amount of students who are able to be seen regularly through their IEP or through other identification. And also the drop-in students have students where we are able to refer. So the way that our screening tool is something that we would use internally. Our guidance counselors send a wellness survey to students. This year they've decided to do that multiple times to be able to check in with kids amidst the pandemic. And so the other part of that is obviously some students are identified by their IEP, and so that they have counseling services as part of their IEP. And then also through our crisis team. So if we have a situation with a student where we believe that we need to implement regular counseling, then that is something we've done as well. We've been highly aware that this year in particular, students are having a harder time to find outside counseling, because often what our counselors are doing and our social workers are doing is connecting them to outside resources so they can have more extensive counseling. But we are seeing that they are having a really hard time, especially if they're a brand new patient. And so then we're setting up more regular check-ins with kids.
Jen, do you guys, similar to what Julie had said, what they're seeing from the screener they use, is there's some stuff across most or all kids that they can use, and they're doing it in total, right, for whole classes around skills and things that they can use. Do you guys use the advisory period for any of that kind of stuff, for, particularly this year around the isolation and that kind of thing?
So this year, yeah, that's a great question. So we have 2 advisory coordinators. And so over the course of the past few years, they have been doing certain lessons either for whole grade level, or last year was the first year that they started going in and just doing, because we have our callback system, the guidance counselors were calling back a full advisory and then doing a social emotional lesson with that small group. They had started that in February last year. So the timing of that was a little difficult. And so that was something that we were hoping to continue with this year. What we have done is we don't have any assemblies. We're not hosting things like that this year. And so we focused on all students are required to be in their advisory for the first 10 minutes. They don't go anywhere. They can't go to a club meeting, or seniors and juniors can't sign out. And so that's a time where advisors are connecting with their advisees. So our 2 advisory coordinators send out all sorts of kind of optional activities that advisors can do. Knowing that some advisors, that is a stronger quality of their personality or their skill set to do that with their advisees. So we see a range in what that looks like. But our hope is that next year we'll go back to the full lessons that we've done either with grade levels or multiple advisories, and then going to those kind of classroom lessons that the guidance counselors will lead.
Thanks. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So that's it for district goals, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
So we will move on to 9C, the diversity, equity, and inclusion audit findings.
Okay. In your board packet is the full audit that we received on January the 4th, which was very comprehensive. That was looking at the focus groups that she did back in November. Then you also have, tonight was placed in your packet, a more concise presentation that our consultant, Carmen Rulin, reviewed the results with the Equity Committee yesterday, and I thought that might be an easier way to approach this, because there's just a lot, as I'm sure as you read it, there's just a lot there. So there were 68 participants that participated in the focus groups, and it's broken out by stakeholder group on page 6. So they had the students, the parents, the administrators had their own group, and then the remaining staff. We did discuss yesterday the low participation rate, because when you think about how many people it went out to multiple times, there was probably the potential for, I don't know, 5,000, over 5,000 people to participate. So with only 68 participants, I'm a little bit concerned about that. So we talked about, Carmen talked about that we could potentially do a survey to get more participation by stakeholders, and I think we'll look at doing that. So I'd like you to turn to the page with the highlights, She kind of goes into the methodology. If there are any questions, I might be able to answer those. And if not, I can definitely find out the answer for you to any specific question. But I wanted to spend our time on the themes, the findings, and the recommendations. There is a need for professional development. I think that is something that we all endorse and agree on. There's talking about the hiring, they noted that there was a lack of diversity in the teaching staff, but she pointed out there's also a lack of diversity on our committee. And as Michelle and Mark can speak to, when we were selecting the committee, we really had that lens, and we chose people. We chose people that we thought were the most diverse people based upon the people who applied. So we talked a little bit about where we may need to just reach out to families and not have the requirement that they need to apply. So it could be like a tap on the shoulder that they need. The ability of the district to meet the technology needs of families and students. Some noted that we're doing a really good job with that. Others noticed that there are some issues still with connectivity. There was a finding around mistrust between students and families of color and their school and or the district. And there was a need or a highlight that talked about including the voice of students and the community. Then under the themes, they talked about mislabeling racial harassment and bias. And as she talked about that, she said that when we're dealing with discipline, there are probably times when we're talking about, that's an unkind thing to say, or that's not respectful. And if it's a racist comment, it's really important to name it as a racist comment. So there's some training that could be done in that area. COVID support, that was an area that she highlighted, that she felt like, generally we're doing a really good job of supporting our families during this period of time. Supports for LGBTQIA, there's definitely some more training needed, but there's also some positive where there were not a lot of reports of from staff or students feeling like they were, that these students were being discriminated against. So that was another positive. Communication with parents across the district. It seems that we can never do enough. And 3 areas that kind of stood out for me was around some wanted still more communication around COVID. There was comments about communicating more widely around the free and reduced meals extension. And then there was some comments around wanting more communication around what's going on with our curriculum. Then she really moved on to the recommendations and went through those. And she said, of course, we need a district-wide equity task force. And we do have that, and we just talked about, she said, yes, that can be the same committee that we set up in the fall, but that we may want to, take a look to see if we need to add a few more members to that. And the other thing that even after 2 meetings we're struggling with is our student participation and how important that is to have that student voice on that committee. So at our next meeting, which will be in February, I think we're going to probably reach out to the students to see if there's a better time for a teenager than 7 in the morning. What do you think, Brady? So I think the committee is very open to that, and I think that we'll be exploring that. She talked about that some districts have an equity officer that's a new idea that I think we'll have to research more. She talked about the importance of having a strategic plan. I think she was glad to hear that we have a strategic plan with an equity goal on it. And even our equity goal, as you noticed in the update, you know, the plan is to get the audit and then to create action steps around that. And so that's what I believe she was talking about in her report. Continue with the policy work. We have just recently received their comments on many of our policies. Cynthia has that. She'll be discussing that with our policy committee, and I think there's plenty of work to keep them busy for a while. The professional development, we have talked about that even as an administrative team before yesterday, about that we feel like March 12th we have a full day, and that might be a great time to kick off this work for at least half a day. We want to be cognizant of the teacher workload, so I don't think we would do a full day, but Carmen said that that's she's done that a lot, either do a half day or 2-hour segments, and then the teachers could use the rest of the time for the planning. Periodic community forums, it's always important to continue with communicating around that, you know, around the COVID and around the inclusiveness. And then there was a recommendation around family engagement practices. Again, they talked about, there was a lot about COVID in this particular report. And they acknowledge that we have some really strong supports in our communities, which is a positive thing, and that we just need to continue to leverage the connections that we have already made. Curriculum, we asked them to specifically look at that, and you know, they noted that we need to look at our curriculum to make sure that it's being culturally responsive and representative of the student body. So our next steps that I kind of see us doing is delving. The hour went very quickly yesterday, so our committee will be looking deeper into the report, discussing it more in February. As I said, possibly change the time for future meetings. Our administrative team has received this report. We've had some very initial discussions, but we will be looking at it in more detail because there's just a lot of information in there. The policy committee will begin to review the recommended changes, and they're going to have to prioritize because there's several policies there. And then the consultant said that they don't write curriculum, but they can provide us with the template, and so they're going to get that to us at some point. I'm not sure. I doubt that we would start that work in March at that PD day, because I think there's other type of training that will probably take priority over that. And then we still have, I think, I'm looking at Cynthia for either a yes or a no. I think we have still some other data to get to them possibly around attendance and discipline. So that's another area that they are willing to look at that, because I'm sure that you noticed that there were some comments around we feel like our children of color were maybe treated differently, and I think that data on suspensions and different things like that will show us you know, whether we have a small concern in that area or a bigger concern. So we'll be providing that for them. And I think those are my highlights, and then, you know, we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
So just so to clarify, this report was solely around the forums, right? So all, you know, a lot of their recommendations I circled and wrote, aren't they doing this? Aren't they doing this? Aren't they doing this? And the answer is yes, right? Mm-hmm. That's just still work. They're to come. right? The policy work, which it sounds like they've done, and the curriculum review, and
Yes.
okay. So I just wanted to make sure I understand. So this is really the first of probably more than one report that
Yes,
they're going to report out to us.
absolutely.
This isn't the full body of their work. Okay, thanks. I'm sure there are questions. Vali.
Thank you. This is a really good, thorough report. I do share the concern about the very, very few people who participated, and this is a lot of recommendations, including a strategic plan that responds to very, very few voices. So I am concerned about that, and I'm wondering what you just said about trying to increase the feedback and the voices is going to happen before we start implementing recommendations, and whether they're going to tweak this report, or how are we going to try to incorporate those new opinions into the work that we're going to do.
She said that that they have a climate survey that they do, and I just think that I think there are ways where we could increase participation greatly through a survey, and then I'm sure they would write another report, and then we can see how much it aligns with some of these. I mean, some of the work that's outlined for next steps, like the policy work, we're not going to get that through a survey anyway. So that's why I tried to outline steps that I feel like we really know that we need to do. But yes, go ahead.
And I do have to say that all the recommendations seem to be very common sense, and they're areas where every district in the whole world could improve upon. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but when we try to prioritize which are the ones that are most applicable to RSU 5, I feel as though we need more feedback before we identify the ones that are most challenging to us in particular.
I would agree.
I was very disappointed to see 11 students. And I know there was some scheduling issues and some other things, but yeah, that was unfortunate. And one from the high school. One.
I have a comment on that, and I think a lot of it is probably trust. I think the students that probably have the most to say do not feel safe saying it. I can't say that for sure, but that's my intuition. And the other comment, I think, is that professional development is what stands out. I think we could accomplish so much if we have culturally competent trainings where we can have these conversations, and we don't, I've said this from the very beginning, where we're not tripping over ourselves, and we're not feeling awkward, and we're not blushing, and we're not terrified, that we know, we want to do no harm. But I don't think ignoring something does no harm. I think ignoring something has us in the position we're currently in. So when I read this, I was completely overwhelmed by the 36 pages. But then when I calmed myself down, I was like, you know what? We can get a lot. We are predominantly white. And that was my my only question to Carmen was, can you come back to us whenever it is you meet with us again and just tell us some anecdotal stories about communities that might look more like us, that are predominantly white. But I think we can go very far on professional development and curriculum. Those two right there, I think, will bring us miles. It is too bad that the number is 68. I think people are zoomed out. I can come up with all sorts of people are zoomed out. They're just overwhelmed by the state of things. They don't want to think when they don't have to think. And I truly think students tells me everything I need to know. The kids in the high school who have things to say, who feel that things aren't fair, they don't feel safe speaking up. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
I wonder how we get to them, though, because we need to hear that. That is critical to inform the work.
I think the climate survey, and she was saying, I think Carmen said that can be anonymous, right? Yeah. So I think a survey could go a long way, versus being video and audioed, and being in a group of people you don't know. safety is so much about being, not necessarily for a talker like me, because I'll just, but whatever, but, for a lot of people who aren't natural talkers, to go be in a Zoom group with a bunch of people they don't know, that is not how you're going to have this conversation. But again, coming back to the professional development for the adults in the room, to have some understanding about being able to, we can't address any of this, and it's rampant if we can't have the conversation. So again, I think professional development and looking at our curriculum will be an amazing first step.
Yeah, I think to me, the thing that jumped out was the professional development, like our staff thing. How do we have these conversations? How do we build this into, our work every day with these kids? Because it's not something that they taught in school, right? For, how to be a successful teacher. But I think it's critical. It's a critical skill. And like any skill, you need instruction on how to do it. And that's what jumped out at me too, was, they're asking for it. We have to give it to them. Susanna.
Yeah, Lindsay just touched on what I was going to say, but I was just going to say that during the meeting, we did talk about the lack of student participation and how do we get what we need. And the idea of the trust was one of those things that it's not enough to, we're not getting it by asking people to come forward, and we're probably not going to get it if we go to somebody, somebody specifically and say, talk to us about this. So it's how do we do these, whether it's the anonymous climate survey that then we can repeat if necessary, or, do various ways and reach out to people and figure out how do we get this data, because we know we need it, and we know that the data that we need is the data that we don't have. So we did spend quite a bit of time looking at how to get that. So I just wanted to put that in, but then you kind of added that a little bit too.
Brady.
Were all people in the high school able to do this? Because I had no idea this happened.
I want to say they were emails that went out to all the student emails. Well, that's Jen, how it was shared, but.
So yes, unfortunately, I think our kids were totally overwhelmed by emails. So I think I sent it maybe 4 times, talked to some individual kids. I hear you on the mistrust. That's hard to hear. But I also think there was a lot that was happening at that time. And I don't want to make that as an excuse. Our administrator meeting was the day before election. And the kids in the high school that I was having conversations with were really struggling with the election. That plus, we just have a hard time. Brady, I don't know if you're probably overwhelmed with your email, I would imagine, if I'm seeing what kids' emails look like. They get the Google Classroom emails is intense, and we're trying to help kids organize with that. But I do think that sometimes our students, when we're asking them to participate in different things, the easiest thing is that we are grabbing them 5 minutes before and saying, remember, you have this meeting right now, which we're not able to do this year. So it's happened with some other things that we're trying to pull kids together for, that we end up just pulling the kids that are in school that day and things like that. So I certainly think that the issue of mistrust is something that we need to address. I was hoping that the kids who had come this summer would have, that came to the discussion that we had in the summer, would have participated in this group. We had more signed up who then didn't show up that day. So there was kind of a myriad of things that happened.
I just want to say I wasn't personalizing. I think it's mistrust of a system, not personalities. Just so you don't, am I clear? It's mistrust of our society, not.
Sure. No,
not
I
FHS.
totally understand. Right.
That's not, yeah.
But it's still, that's not the atmosphere that we want at the high school. We want students to feel like they can be heard and come forward on a variety of topics, and it's certainly something that we're striving to build.
Susanna?
Did you say Maura had a?
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Maura.
All right, I'll go after Maura.
We'll let Maura go, and then we'll go back around. Maura?
Oh, thank you. I had just a couple comments and then a question, and I wanted to thank the board and everyone for undertaking this work, and this organization for doing all this. I think it's really, I'm just really glad that we're doing this. And I think it's really important. So the couple comments I just had were, one, I know we've talked about this before, but board learning on this, I know this report doesn't touch on that, but that's something I've been thinking about, you know, as board members, if we're going to be looking at these reports and thinking about what the district is doing with regard to these, you know, equity and inclusion, how can we be also doing board learning? And I know Becky has tried to reach out to MSBA and whatnot, but I just wanted to express, I think that's important too. And I don't know where we go, but perhaps that's just something I hope we can think about. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was the student letters. A couple of the student letters that we got from last year. I don't know if the auditor or the new committee has looked at those as part of their work, but I just wanted to suggest those as another possible source for student voice, since there was not very much, unfortunately, in the focus groups. And then I was just sort of wondering if we could get a general picture of, I don't know if this is a question you can even ask. I don't want to put you on the spot, the committee members or Becky, but I'm just kind of wondering if you could give a general sense of how the committee is approaching the work, and or still sort of figuring that out, and what next steps are in moving forward, or is that still a work in progress? Thank you.
So our committees met twice, and so the way we're really kind of approaching the work is just, we knew that we needed the audit, and we had her review the audit, and then at our next meeting, we're going to delve deeper into the audit, and then you know, we'll probably kind of look at some of these findings and just have a more open discussion, because yesterday was pretty formal with Carmen just presenting this more. And we've made it clear on the committee that they're an advisory committee that will be making recommendations that will be coming back to the board for discussion. That's probably not as specific as you want, but it's just a very, very newly formed committee, so I really don't have much more than that to report out at this point.
Sure, I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Susanna.
Thank you. I just want to add that we're also talking about reaching out to some alumni. So to add to the student voice of students who are not currently here, but have been here and either gone on to have other experiences, or are having some distance on their reflection and might be more willing to speak, some of whom have already spoken over the past year. So that's just one area that we realized we hadn't gotten so far in a focus group. So that's one other place that might give us more student input.
Thank you. Brady.
Just going back to like the mistrust you guys point out about how like not trusting the system. I don't know how much of that is like for not showing up, but like me personally, I had no idea this happened, and I went to the group in the summer, and there was like multiple people there who I know probably would have gone, because if there was one person there, I know more people who would have gone had they known this was a thing. So I think that while some kids may not have come because of that, I think that a great majority of the kids at the high school had no idea this was happening, and so that would lead to no one showing up.
Fair enough. Maddie.
Trying to remember how I wanted to start. I love the idea of the survey, if nothing else, to just help us figure out directionally where the best places to start. There's certainly opportunities to look at data. You know, one of the notes I took was, you know, there seems to be a feeling that our special ed families are predominantly non-white and low income, and so I'm wondering, do we know that that's true, or is that just a perception? So that's the kind of stuff that I'm curious to know more about. But for me, if there is an overarching theme, it is that lack of trust piece, and not necessarily the lack of trust in coming forward, but the lack of trust that we are going to engage in meaningful, qualitative, long-range culture evolution. I want to thank you, Becky, for the way you opened our meeting today. We're in a difficult time in our history where people feel divided from one another more than ever before and point at one another and call each other wrong and fervently believe that they are correct in assessing the other to be wrong. And I think that professional development will certainly help us with that, with navigating that terrain in our school communities, but it requires leadership and courageous leadership from you and your staff and from us as a board. So doing things like being willing to speak to difficult situations publicly is a great first step, and I was grateful that you sort of kicked off this meeting on that note. And so I just wanted to give voice to that while I'm really curious to see some of the data and get some buy-in from our community about the best way to begin in this work, I'd like to see us integrate it into our strategic plan, if possible. So I don't know if it makes sense to have a DEI plan and a strategic plan, or if we should merge the two. I mean, how do we meaningfully make this part of who RSU 5 is? And I have other more specific questions, but they're small. I guess what I'm wondering is some of my specific questions, or I'm sure others have them as well. Should we send those to the committee members?
Well, I think something like the special ed, is Bonnie still here? Does anybody, oh, she left, okay. So something like the special ed one, if you would email me that would be something she would research. So I think it depends on what the question is as to what would be the appropriate group to kind of delve into it and answer it.
So can I ask one of my little questions then?
Yeah, and I just want to, I do want to remind you that it is now part of our strategic plan. So we did that in the summer where that was a request from the board. And so we have our initial one that we did with the strategic planning, but we added that one, and I think we added one around the equity, not the sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, I forgot about that. Just two questions that I would love to know the answer to. One is, how is it possible that we have teachers who are not wearing masks in the classroom? That was surprising. I saw a comment that I think it was students saying that or was it staff, that we have restorative justice systems in place at the middle school and at the high school, and that's the first I've ever heard of that. And I asked my daughter, because I think typically in a restorative justice scenario there would be students participating in that, so I was surprised to hear that we have that in place. If so, great.
Okay, so those are I'll ask Jen and Ray and maybe Will to come up and answer those about the restorative justice and explain how you do that in your buildings. And the mask wearing, we have addressed that when we have become aware of it, and I think that is, I don't know, I'll look at Brady because he's our student, but I do not think that the not wearing the mask is happening very often. I don't think it by the teachers, but tell me, Brady.
I mean, it happens. Like it's not like a common thing, but like you definitely do see it happen in the school. And I guess that like something someone did point out in here was, I don't know where it was, but like the power difference and how the student felt that like them coming to the teacher and saying something about that, it puts them in an awkward spot, and it's not somewhere you want to be where you're like trying to correct your teacher on something. So that is also something that is seen in the high school.
You know, quickly about the masks, I can say, like, one of the things we were struggling with in the fall is some teachers wear paper masks, because those people with glasses might know that sometimes the paper masks are easier. And when you wear a mask for an entire day, they start to fall. And so you'll see teachers doing this all day long. You know, there was one teacher who sent me an email who was very upset that the teacher had walked out of a classroom when they were alone and forgotten to put their mask on, and wrote me within 2 minutes to say, I feel terrible. I just had my mask off because I was alone, came out of the room. You know, I think those are some cases that we've addressed. It's not something that I see. I don't know if they put it on really fast when I come, but I think that for our school at the high school, I think the staff has done an outstanding job trying to really adhere to the guidelines. In terms of restorative justice, so we have been, I would say at the high school, we have been practicing restorative justice comes in lots of different forms. And so the whole kind of theory behind it, and I think some of the members of the board have done lots of work with this and research on this, is that it's about taking a potentially disciplinary situation and turning it into a learning opportunity. And so we have been working in small ways to implement restorative justice over the course of the last 5 years. So an example is that there are times where in the past where a student would have received a suspension, they are doing a research project and then they are required to present either to a group of peers. We've done it with a group of younger kids, or they present to Mr. Mellon and to me. And so we often, an element that we've included is that the student has some say into whether they are willing to participate in that restorative process. And we have sent, all of our Endeavor teachers have gone for the Endeavor program to restorative workshops over the last 4 years. They've gone every year except this year. Mr. Mellon has participated in multiple workshops. And so it's something that we do not have a full-blown restorative system here, but it's something that we've been using in particular cases and continue to learn more about.
I think that's a good summary for the middle school too. I mean, we try to, whenever there's something going on, to kind of connect whatever we're going to do with what happened. With that, we don't use the language with kids and parents. This is restorative. We use how I will say it to kids a lot is, you've taken something away from our community. How are you going to give back to our community? With that, we gotta, even this out here at our school, and that's, some of the language that we've used. I am proud to say we're in January, and we have not suspended a student yet. So it's been really nice, and the high school has, sent over some kids as part of their restorative projects to speak to some of our kids and do that, which is also nice to have that connection with the high school and our kids to kind of hear from them and talking about different issues. So that has worked well in the past.
I would say sort of ditto. I mean, we don't have a specific sort of like student core or anything like that in terms of it, but the language we use, and I think it occurs through the elementary as well. I mean, I know certainly for us, and I believe it is across the other schools, the language we use at our school when a student has made a poor choice is a part of their reflection. We then get to the point is, how do you fix this? And they play a role, an increasing role from when they're very little to as they move up through middle school, into identifying how they would fix it. And that requires a certain awareness of the impact it's had. And it really pulls, and we then focus in on empathy, and that is really becomes the sort of the key component of how they're going to fix it. And for those students for whom poor choices are more frequent than others, they do get well familiar with the process, and they'll start to identify ahead of time, I know I've got to fix this up, or I'm not quite sure how I'm going to fix this, or when we pose the question, how do you anticipate fixing this? Some of them have some prior experience to call upon, and they'll be like, well, I could use this strategy. Nobody uses the word again, but one or two might think it. But so it is a key component of all the work they do, and it is that connection, again, from our elementary children up, around the impact to others, teaching into empathy, figuring out how to address that.
Thank you, all three of you. I really just was curious about that, but I think I just had a realization in listening to their answers. Like, here I am on the board, starting my fourth year, and I had no idea that we had these processes in place. And that's a really good news story. And if I didn't know, I'm guessing that a lot of our community didn't know. And so, along with this overarching theme of mistrust in our making meaningful progress, there's probably a real lack of awareness about where things are working really well. And so I think that part of this work, a big part of it, is a theme that we've talked about a lot over the past few years. It's communication. It's, maybe it's, Becky, it's your newspaper article, or or senior projects. There's so many opportunities for us to share these kind of meaningful things that are happening in our school communities that I think would engender a lot of goodwill.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Vali.
Super short, but I just wanted to point out that even though we don't have a lot of racial diversity or gender diversity, we do have a lot of socioeconomic diversity. So to the extent that we're trying to amplify voices of diversity, please do consider that the group of students that have a different perspective because of their home backgrounds.
Excellent point. Okay. So we will move on the agenda. We don't have any board comments or committee reports tonight, no policy or unfinished business. So we will move on to new business. As Becky alluded to earlier, we do have 2 open spots for subcommittees that we need to fill. Yes.
I just want to let the administrators know that they are free to leave.
And you can leave the basket behind, Will. Is it empty? Yes, thank you all for coming tonight. Negotiations, the professional contract is up to be negotiated this year, and the 3 folks on that committee prior to Dwight's departure were Dwight, Jen, and myself. Jen and I would really appreciate a third person in that process. I think it's really important to have 3 people on that professional contract negotiation. And then the other open seat we have is the Region 10 high school board. And that one we absolutely are required to fill. We have 2 seats on that board, and one of them can be taken by a community member, and Karen Van Nodstrom has been kind enough to do that last year and this year, and we appreciate her efforts on that, but we definitely need someone from this board to join that board as well. And for those that are curious of when that board meets, according to Ginny, her best estimation is it's the 3rd Monday of the month. And in Brunswick at the school, I believe, right? Oh yeah, and Maura was on that board last year, so she might be able to confirm that date information, but she may have wiped it from her memory by now.
No, that sounds right.
Okay, thanks. So I think in your packages, everyone has the current listing. It's pink of subcommittee membership, and so this currently shows.
Michelle,
yes.
So,
did you want to be on the board?
This is like a kind of like 1st grade birthday party problem.
Was not enough for everybody?
Right. So, and I certainly don't want to like identify my favorites in any way because I wouldn't be able to. So what this basket is that Kelly Rogers, our assistant principal, when we come to these, because everybody's juggling so many things, we generally don't have 2 administrators from one school. Hence, the assistant principals don't come. So she had then said, oh, as a empathetic move to our other administrators, I'll send some cookies along. So that's what it is. Now, I could leave them here and you can fight amongst yourselves, but there are 8 cookies. If anybody would like one, they are all individually wrapped and made with a mask on. And I will tell you that they're also delicious. So I don't know how you want to resolve this, but I'm happy to walk out with the whole lot or leave them for people. If people would like one, I'm happy to share them.
You should leave and run. Yes.
Okay. All right. If you have a solution to fix it.
Yeah.
And if I have to do restorative justice tomorrow, I'm not going to be happy. And they'd be like, well, maybe you can fix it by making some
More cookies.
I shall leave them here, and good luck.
Yes. Send our thanks to Kelly.
I will.
Okay, so so the pink sheet in everybody's packet includes the current membership of the subcommittees. So I guess we will just open it up to see if there's anyone who has interest in either of those two. And just because, you know, they're both, they both fall under the tier 1, if you guys remember, our tiers of, not like tears down our face because we're on too many subcommittees, but tiers in terms of importance of our subcommittees. Some of them are required by law and required for other things. And both of these that are open are tier 1 spots. So we need to get these full. And please let us know if you feel like, geez, I would take one of those, but I need to get off of something else to make space on my plate. We certainly understand that and are willing to juggle as necessary. So, Susanna.
Quick question. Firstly, I brought my calendar for you today.
Thank you.
I can't do the Monday.
Okay.
So I did double check on that. And thank you for the. Can you say when the negotiations meets? Is that a set time or is that?
It's not. We set those up. So typically how this process works is the negotiating team will meet amongst ourselves to review the existing contract, come up with some strategies and some ideas. And that's the committee, Becky and Rick, the finance director. And then we will set up times with the representatives from the association that are negotiating on their behalf. And typically it's like late afternoon, like 3:30 to 7 or something like that. And we schedule as many as we need until we have settled the contract. So there's really no set time, so we can kind of work around people's schedules around that. So, but I would say if you're never available afternoon, early evening, then it's probably not a good fit. Because I mean, we can switch the day, but it's usually that's the time frame because most of them are teachers, so they can't do it during the day.
I think we did like 4 to 8 when we did the.
Yep. Support staff. Yeah. So don't all rush and volunteer at once.
I could possibly consider that one, but I would want to look at what else I'm doing.
Okay.
And I do often, COVID dependent, do some things in the afternoons, but that's not sure how that's looking this year with COVID.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
But I'd be open to talking about that.
To negotiations, okay?
Yeah.
Anyone? Valley literally ran out of the room when we started talking about this. So anybody want to nominate Valley while she's out of the room? I mean, I know the Region 10 one historically has been a difficult one for us to fill just because it is, you know, a time commitment once a month for that board meeting. But we need to find someone that can fill that spot. So,
and it's probably less of a commitment than being on the negotiations. I mean, I think we added up 30 something hours worth of negotiation time. So Yeah, right, if not more, so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a little more interesting, but at the same time, it's not.
All right, we're gonna draw names out of a hat, I guess. I mean, is there anyone who has any inkling of interest in this that we can hard sell? Sure, yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, if this is something you're interested in, if you needed to clear off other things, I'm sure we could pick them up, you know, get support for those. All right, Valley, you're gonna have to come save us and do Region 10.
She also is not available.
Same board you're on?
Yeah.
You guys actually like, can we schedule these on the third Monday of the month?
I mean, I'll do it for the remainder of the year. I mean, I know it's, you know, it's January.
That's all we're looking for is until we redo these in June, so.
Well, I'm being smart then, because I only have to do it for half a year.
Hey, take advantage of that.
And I started doing it before Maura. It really is I mean, Maura can probably speak to it more. It's a great committee and it's a great group of people. You know, I understand it's just it's a hard sell on a Monday night, but I mean.
You're not getting off negotiations, are you?
No, I'll stay on negotiations, but, and I feel like stipend review is coming, sort of. We're near the. No, right.
So what I would say is if you're okay staying with stipends for now, but if you find it becomes too much, then let us know and we'll
right. I mean,
we'll find you relief.
I really prefer, obviously, you know, being on a couple of the tiers. I mean, and again, I don't know if like we want to get into that again, where you know there has to be some equity in the board on being on boards. I mean, I think that's something that it comes up every year, and I think you did a great job doing that paper that I don't think anyone else has in front of them because it's from a while back. But you know that we have to be cognizant of everybody on this board. Nobody's life is any less busy than anybody else's. So you know.
I think I remember us talking about this 2 years ago. There's no way for us to alternate a representative. It has
Correct.
to. That would be the way to solve this problem. But I mean, I get why they wouldn't.
Yeah, but I mean, I will say that you know, I don't think they certainly want consistency in the board member. But if you had to miss a meeting, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't know if they're meeting remotely or not, or if they're all in person. I'm not sure how that board meeting is, you know, if you can do this from your dining room or you know, going to Brunswick, but
I'll do it for the rest of the year. We can move.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Angela, did you have the opportunity to look through the committees? You know, Angela met with Becky and myself last week to do her board orientation. And part of that is we provide her with a list of all the committees. You know, if there's one that you're interested in, well, first of all, I'll tell you, other than negotiations, all of our committee meetings are open. So even if you're not on a committee, you're welcome to sit in and join. Just, you know, ask Ginny in the office when they meet and where. Well, most of them are Zoom now, so what's the Zoom link? And you're welcome to join. But if there's any that you are interested in being a part of, we want to make sure that you're involved. Like Jen said, it's only through June when we sort of rejigger these, but did you find any?
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't take on what Dwight's, but I have a lot of evening meetings for my work, and so just getting this down was a lift. So I'm looking that only Beth is on the Dropout Prevention Committee. I would like to support that. You know, that's of interest to me.
That'd be great. Okay.
So we can talk about when you want to. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then if, like I said, if there's other ones that are sort of interest to you and you want to sort of pop in, between now and June to see, hey, I really kind of like this one, or no, not my cup of tea, I would encourage you to do that. Okay, anyone else? Do we need to have a mini election here? Anyone else want negotiations or Region 10? We have our 2 tributes, volunteers tribute. Okay. So then do I have a motion for consideration and approval to appoint the board members to the following committees for the 2020-2021 school year? Professional Negotiations, Susanna Hancock, and Maine Region 10 Technical High School Board, Jen Galetta. Oh, and yes, and Angela Kinghorn to the Dropout Prevention Committee. Thank you, Valley. Second, Jen. Any other question, discussion? All those in favor? Oh, no, sorry. I remembered.
I have a question. Please.
Oh, yes.
And that's just, can I, at some point, doesn't need to be now, just look at what else I'm doing?
Yes.
With you?
Oh, yes, yes. I can tell you. Do you want to know?
Well, no, I mean, I know it's the cable TV strategics, and then I'm on the strategic communications, and then I'm doing the DEI and the RSU sustainability, which are both auxiliary.
Oh, yes.
So it's just having those 4. Which
yeah, so the purple, well, you don't know the colors. The cable board, that's a tier 4, so
it hasn't met yet.
Yeah. Sustainability we have as a tier 3, and then strategic communications and the equity are both tier 2. So I imagine those are the 2 that are a little bit more of a heavy lift. So since you just started equity, I'm guessing you probably don't want to get off of that one. But if sustainability or strategic communications was one that you wanted to shift, I think we could certainly make that happen for you.
Do I need to talk about that now, or can that be something?
While we're doing it, if you know off the top of your head which one you think would be a good
I
candidate?
think so far, I think it's probably manageable. I'm just aware that it may get to be a bit as the spring wears on.
Yeah.
And I'd be hesitant dropping this communications right now, in the sense that we've all been doing some work specifically for our meeting that's next week, and bringing somebody else to take that on right now for that project might be challenging.
Well, I think there are also, you could certainly finish out what you were working on for next week and attend the meeting, as anybody could. If you wanted to wrap it up and then be done with that committee, I think that would be fair.
The other thing is, I don't know if it's okay to go to that meeting, and then if we seem to be having quite a lot, I don't know.
Well, would you feel better if we found someone to replace you on that committee?
Gotta stop touching this. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
But
right. So yeah. So we have identified for strategic communications right now. I think it's Candy, Valley, and Susanna. Is that right? And I think when we were sort of identifying the numbers of on our committees and what was the ideal number, we identified that one as 2 to 3.
Okay.
So we could do it with 2. If we had someone that was interested in the strategic communications committee, we could certainly add them at this point. If you're not volunteering, it's okay. I'm not going to hold you to it. Yes, Beth?
So is the sustainability committee something different than the wellness committee? Okay, so sustainability isn't even on here.
Yes, it's not on there. I asked her that. And
DEI isn't on here.
I think it's because they are not ongoing as of now. They're both, what do they call them? Ad hoc committees to the board.
Okay.
Kind of like the high school renovation was. It was identified and it stayed in place until it was gone. I imagine these probably become permanent committees of the board, but maybe not. She's going to throw something at me. Stop adding committees. Yeah, so they're not even on that list. That's right. Vali.
So this is a little tangential, but I would advocate to make sustainability one of the ad hoc standing committees that continues in perpetuity. So I don't know where that fits into the work that you do, Becky, to get it to that level, but it certainly meets at that level. The issues that we discuss are at that level, and they're not temporary. So it should definitely be on this list, and it should be considered a committee that will continue to meet.
And I imagine DEI will eventually be a, yeah, I was gonna say, that seems like something we would do, you know, sort of at our annual meeting at the end of the year. I don't even know what the process is to formalize it, so we'll figure that out and bring it back, and then we can have that discussion. As it relates to strategic communications, I'll look to Candy and Vali and, you know, ask you guys how hard you want us recruiting a third member for you, or are you manageable at this point?
And I'm happy to try it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have what, one more meeting after this week, after next week's in April, so I think it probably is okay.
Yeah, if it's only through June, we can manage.
Okay. All right. So,
okay, so I'll stay on it unless I have a panic attack.
okay. All right. Well, we'll try to avoid panic attacks for everybody. And all right. So we have a motion. We have a second to add Susanna to negotiations, Jen to Region 10, and Angela to dropout prevention. You guys ready for a vote? Okay. Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Angela.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
Brady.
Yes.
And Jeremy.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so moving on to personnel, do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ an FHS technology integration teacher for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year? It's a one-year position. Beth, thank you. Second, Susanna.
So I'm happy to recommend Daniel Picard. In December, Daniel graduated from the University of Maine at Farmington with a degree in math. He has recently been working at Fayette Elementary School as a technology integrator. One of his references said, Daniel has shown an ability to be resilient and flexible, and he's done an amazing job working with middle school students. He was able to design instructional activities that were unique, effective, and meaningful for students, and he was able to implement a variety of instructional activities and assessments that incorporated astounding technology opportunities for his students. We're very excited to welcome Daniel to Freeport High School, and I know both Gail and Keith are definitely excited to have another member on their team. The tech team has been extremely busy this year, as you can well imagine.
Okay, any questions? Then we shall move on to the vote. Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Angela.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
Brady.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
And Candy.
Yes.
Great. Welcome. Okay, so we are up to the second public comment period of the evening. Reminder that if you'd like to participate, you could do that through the Zoom. And if you are in the Zoom meeting and have a comment, we just ask that you raise your hand and Jen will enable you to speak. No? Is there anybody in there? Okay, no one other than us. Okay, so then I would take a motion to enter into executive session to discuss labor contracts and proposals pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056D. Susanna, Beth, thank you. I went so long without having to do a vote, and now they're just back to back. Here we go. Who am I starting with this time? Susanna.
Yes.
Angela.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
Brady.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
And Lindsay.
Yes.
And Jen.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thanks very much, guys.